This is Radio Hereford FC, the home of the Bulls.
Hello and welcome back to the latest edition of the Bullscast with me, George Holloway. In this episode, we're looking back at a week that saw Hereford extend their unbeaten run thanks to late equalisers against Bedford Town and Darlington. We'll get the thoughts of former Hereford United striker Paul Fewings on the Bulls' first point at Blackwell Meadows in 6 years. And we'll preview a busy weekend of FA Cup second qualifying round action. I'm joined by Keith Hall and Radio Hereford FC reporter Ian Sandford. Gents, good to see you. It's 3 unbeaten now for Hereford. Have they turned a corner, Keith?
Well, let's certainly hope so. A lot more movement through midfield. I thought the passing game certainly pepped up a little bit. And when they get a bit more ambitious, then I think we'll start winning games.
Ian, do you think that the last 3 games have helped put to bed the struggles at the start of the season?
It's a bit early to say that yet. I think we've had a win and 2 draws. We're still sort of conceding and going behind in every game. So I think it's a little bit early to say that we've put those worries to bed as yet.
Well, let's start by rewinding to the 2-2 draw at home to Bedford Town last Tuesday. Paul Caddis named an unchanged side to the one that beat Alfreton 3 days prior, but it was another slow start from Hereford. 7 of the 13 goals they've conceded this season have come in the first quarter of the match. You can't keep giving yourself a mountain to climb, Keith.
No, that's the problem. Individual errors, maybe a lack of communication at the back straight away. It'd be better if they could come out focused and help each other out, because really they need to stop those crosses coming in at source, and I think that would probably help stem the flow, although we didn't do it at Darlington, thankfully.
Well, as you mentioned, it was a cross that gave Bedford Town that opener. Ryan Blake heading in Ellis Brown's ball into the box on 4 minutes. And Hereford just didn't seem to deal with it particularly well, Ian.
It is a worry at how we've started the games this season, particularly the first half performances have been quite poor, although it was better on Saturday generally. We need to stop going behind in games. I think defensively we've had a few changes during the 8 games of the season, and we've had 3 captains as well in the first 3 games of the season, which I thought was interesting and wasn't quite sure why that happened, but Hudson was dropped, wasn't he, sort of start of the season, and Skinner took the captaincy. So it's interesting we've had that sort of inconsistency, although that does seem to be settling down a bit, and Hudson seems to be taking on the captaincy role once again. One or two changes at the back throughout the season. Skinner started at left back at Spennymoor, and then he's reverted back to his more natural position. We brought in the new guy from West Bromwich Albion, who really does look a class above. I'm sure we'll talk about him some more during this call. But things will settle down, hopefully. You know, it's still early days in the season and far too early to be pressing the panic button, I think, George.
Yeah, absolutely. Tyrone Marsh called in on 60 minutes into the bottom left-hand corner to double Bedford's lead. It was a great finish, Keith.
Yeah, very good finishes. They I wouldn't say looked clinical at the start of the game, but they did take those 2 opportunities really well. Perhaps could have got another one before half-time, but I did feel Hereford showed some good character to fight back from 2-0 down. Got a bit of momentum and kept that momentum going from the Alfreton victory. And it was a Lawson Darth strike that was excellent. Really powerful drive right into the bottom corner. And then, of course, we got Montel Gibson getting a goal on his debut again. The second time around that he's got a goal on his Hereford debut, as it were. So it was good to see. So all in all, we left the ground not knowing whether we've improved significantly, although that desire and character that obviously Paul Caddis is looking for was there.
As you say there, Keith, Hereford fought back, but they may not have been given the chance to if Theo Richardson hadn't produced a great save to deny Marsh's free kick.
He did, but that's what you pay Theo Richardson to do. And that's why I was really encouraged when he signed. I wasn't actually expecting it. That was, sort of one of the standout signings of the summer. He is a very good goalkeeper, very athletic, distribution's excellent, and if you can make saves in crucial games, which is not happening just yet, so early in the season, that signing could make a difference later on.
How important do you feel, Ian, it was to retain Theo Richardson this summer?
Oh, hugely important. It's been the first season for quite a few seasons where we've managed to retain the same keeper going into a new season. I think he is a decent keeper for sure, and he made some great saves on Saturday at Darlington. Even Steve Watson, the Darlington manager, said in his post-match interview that our keeper made 3 or 4 really good saves, and he did. So he is a very decent keeper. So I think it is important to have retained him, and for that communication to the defenders that have remained with us as well. So that's got to be good for the future too.
Much improved Hereford side came out for the second half and pulled one back, as you mentioned, Keith, through a great strike from Lawson Diath, who had a similar chance from a corner earlier in the game but wasn't able to make clean enough contact with the ball. He didn't make the same mistake twice.
That's right. I actually never felt as though as long as Bedford didn't get the third, I never felt the game was beyond Hereford, because it was a little bit open and both sides were creating opportunities. It was a matter of taking them. And with that Darth effort and then Gibson's equaliser, we almost could have won it in the last couple of minutes of added time. So, it was a positive second half.
As the minutes ticked by, it did look like it might just be a consolation, but up stepped substitute Montel Gibson on his second debut to take advantage of Dan Wilkes' handling error with 2 minutes remaining. And right place, right time, Ian.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure the Bedford goalkeeper will be rueing that mistake 2 minutes from the end. And Gibson was in the right place to slot it in, as all good strikers are. So a valuable point, especially at home, in front of the home crowd, who need a bit of sort of jollying along at some portions of the crowd at the moment, because it's doom and gloom from a few people, although I do think that's far too early. But it was good to have Montel Gibson back. He's obviously got a good relationship with Ramey Campbell, which as the season goes on, I'm sure that will bear fruit. And to score on both his debuts is memorable.
Gibson had come on alongside Ramey Campbell on 52 minutes and helped to swing the momentum in Hereford's favour. They played together before at Ilkeston and Matlock. Is that a partnership that Bulls fans can get excited about, Keith?
If they get a little bit closer together than they did when they worked together at Darlington, I think time will tell. Obviously, Ramey Campbell's the figurehead. He'll get little flick-ons and he'll try and put the ball in the path of Gibson. If they can do that, get that combination and understanding back, then I think that's a strike force that will score goals. And you've still obviously got Andy Williams to pep Hereford's force going again. It's an extra option for Paul Caddis.
4 days later, Hereford made the 230-mile trip up to Darlington and came away with their first point from Blackwell Meadows since November 2019. They had lost on their previous 4 visits. Will Paul Caddis look back on that, Ian, as a good point?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure he will. I mean, a point away from home in any league is a decent point usually. And as you alluded to there, that we've got such a poor record at Darlington that I said to Keith on Saturday I would have taken the point before kick-off. So that was a very decent point. I think Darlington will improve as the season goes on. So I think we can look back later in the season as that being a very good point. So yes, I think the Bulls went away happy on Saturday. Yeah.
Hereford started brightly, but Darlington grew into the game and started to control that midfield.
Yeah, very much in the game at the start. Both sides were looking for that opener, and it was Darlington had got it. It was a corner routine that actually got them going. And I know it was offside, but it was really clever corner routine. It was chalked off, I think, for offside, and then a scrappy goal from another corner to get ahead. But there was a spell midway through that first half that I don't think we had that grip in midfield that we're looking for. We need an enforcer in there, somebody who literally will command the centre circle, not necessarily be a creative player, a playmaker, but just somebody who's a bit destructive and get a foot in. Because my man of the match was Will McGowan for Darlington, because he gets in and around the penalty area then, 25, 30 yards out, and he looks for those through balls. Now, if you had an enforcer in the centre of midfield, someone like Gus Mafuta, we're still desperate to see him get into Hereford's centre field, get him in that engine room. But that's the sort of player we need, so the sooner he can get fit, the better.
Well, let's talk about that opening goal then. On 35 minutes, Jake Maskell tapping in Cedric Main's deflected effort off Michael Parker, and just looked like a really scrappy goal, Keith.
Yeah, it is. I wondered whether the Hereford defence were concerned with a body going down, Darlington player going down inside the 6-yard box, and I wondered whether they were distracted for a split second, and that's all you need really as a striker. And Maskell prodded the ball home from very, very close range, and he is one of those players that's will put himself around, and when he's got the support of big, tall central defenders from set pieces, it is something that you've got to really focus on and try and get anything on the ball, put your body on the line, get anything there to stop those opportunities coming in. So, disappointed to concede such a scrappy goal.
Perhaps Cedric Main will be kicking himself, Ian, that he didn't double his side's lead just a minute or so afterwards. He struggled to dig the ball out from underneath his feet.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. He's a thorn in your side, Cedric Main. He's a very decent player. He did play sort of slightly wider than I thought he would on Saturday, because that's the emergence of the Maskell, the guy they've sort of found in the last few months. But he did get it under his feet a bit, and I think he'd be frustrated about that. But he blows hot and cold, Cedric Main, as we talked about on Saturday. So he can do that, but then on other times he can score some great goals.
Hereford seemed to cause Darlington problems on the counter as the second half went on, Ian.
Yeah, very much so. I thought the first sort of 20 minutes of the second half, the game was a little bit flat, but I think Hereford definitely came into the ascendancy towards the second half, as it were. And I think when we scored the goal, we were very much deserving of that goal, because we'd certainly sort of asserted ourselves. And what a goal by Sam Osborne. So a second sort of worldie in as many games by one of the Hereford midfielders. And the Darlington players and manager have both credited him with it being, a really class goal, and how what a great strike it was. So well done to Sam. And I think Hereford deserved that goal at the time.
One player that was causing Darlington a few problems and was popping up in some surprising positions was Michael Parker on that left-hand side, who was really showing his athletic capabilities. Paul Caddis mentioned in his post-match interview that he has actually played left-back for the West Brom under-21s, Keith, and Darlington struggled to deal with him.
Yeah, obviously, as spectators, you sign someone 6'6", you think he is going to be an out-and-out central defender, but he's very classy on the ball. I mean, Paul Fewings, who was summarising with us at Darlington on Saturday, thought he was a little bit anxious for the first 10 or 15 minutes, but then grew into the game, and then he described him as Rolls-Royce defending a little bit later on. In the second half, he pops up on the left flank, as you say, as a left wing back, and he was, I wouldn't say tearing Darlington to shreds, but he was giving him an awful lot of problems down this left side, because he's quite quick feet, moves the ball nicely, skillful, getting those crosses in that Hereford needed to try and get back into the match. And so we saw another aspect of his game. You would say, really good signing. We haven't lost when he's been in the team at all. It's not down to individuals, but it's coincidental that Hereford's form has picked up when they've started to play the ball out from the back a little bit more, rather than relying on constant long diagonals out to the flanks.
Yeah, and he created that chance for Andy Williams on 67 minutes, who fired inches wide of that left-hand post, causing Darlington all sorts of problems down that left-hand side. Should Darlington have had a penalty, Ian, when Will McGarren went down inside the area on 76 minutes?
I would argue yes. There was definite shirt pull and body contact, so I think they feel a bit hard done by not getting a penalty. If they'd have got a second, I think that would have killed the game off. But, you roll with the punches. Paul Caddis argued in his post-match interview that perhaps we should have had 2 penalties right at the very death, once with the Batemo incident and another time that just after that when Andy Williams was bundled off the ball. So although we didn't really I didn't pick those 2 up particularly in commentary, but with regards to the Darlington penalty, I think they probably should have had a penalty there.
As had happened on Tuesday night, a substitute came up trumps for Paul Caddis with time running out. This time it was Sam Osborne with a piece of magic, Keith.
Yeah, really excellent shot, wasn't it? Good technique. He actually shot with the outside of his right foot, so the ball then curled in to the bottom corner. So it was a really fine strike. And incidentally, he could have scored another similar goal about a minute later. So all of a sudden that game could have turned on its head. But overall, I think it was a fair result at 1-1. I'm with Ian, really. I think there was probably penalties at both ends. I thought the referee was a little bit weak throughout the game. Seemed to sometimes let things go, and other times he was getting a bit petulant, so a bit inconsistent there, but we can't blame the referee. Overall, it was actually quite an entertaining game. I was listening to Paul Fewings summarising, and he was looking at tactics and what Cadiz might change, and crediting Steve Watson for subtle changes in the first half, because Eno was very, very swift down the right flank in the first 10 or 15 minutes, but he changed their tactics to a degree and then started counter-attacking, and then if Eno doesn't come back, that puts the pressure on the likes of Aaron Skinner. So overall, I think both managers probably be satisfied with the point. Maybe Watson's looking at those goal-scoring chances and the saves by Theo Richardson. But then again, Hereford, in that last quarter of an hour, could have scored 3 or 4 themselves.
Let's just touch on that Preston Patemo injury, Ian, because it looked really nasty, completely poleaxed inside the area.
Yeah, it was a horrendous looking incident. He'd only been on the pitch maybe, less than 10 minutes, and was going through on goal, and Andy Williams, I think, crossed it from the right, and he was chasing in, and the keeper was coming out. Keeper basically punched the ball, and Preston as well, and he just went down flat on his back and wasn't moving, and he was in a very odd position where his head was slightly lifted off the ground, and I think he had his sort of right forearm sticking up, which signs of concussion, I believe. But as you say, he seems to have made a good recovery. They got him in the shower after the game and he was conscious and talking. So, I'm sure he's got a big headache on at the moment. But, I'm not quite sure what the protocols are with those concussive head injuries, whether he's got to miss a certain period of time. But we obviously wish him a full and speedy recovery. He's been very unlucky, hasn't he? Because he had an injury-blighted season last year, and he probably really feels he hasn't got going in a Hereford shirt as yet, and we haven't really seen his full potential. I'm sure he's a great young player, but it was a nasty looking thing at the time, and I wasn't really looking for a penalty, but apparently the Hereford players and Paul Cadiz were looking at it as a foul and potential penalty situation. But I think we're from our perspective, we're more worried about his welfare. But it was a horrible looking incident.
As Ian says, Keith, it's a real shame for Preston Patemo. We saw him play at fullback in pre-season. He's also spent time in midfield. It's a real shame all round. Yeah,
very committed, very energetic, very enthusiastic. All attributes that you want to have within your squad. And as a youngster, he's trying to make his way in the game. So I think if he gets an opportunity, maybe 10, 20, 30 minutes somewhere, and really impresses, then he might go on a run and get his place in the starting lineup, and that's what he'll be looking for.
Now, former ball striker Paul Fewings was part of our commentary team at Darlington on Saturday, and he gave his thoughts on the match to Keith.
At half-time, I said they were almost a little bit too nice, a little bit off the pace, and if you're just one step away from that intensity that you need to close down the opposition, you become really stretched. And if you haven't got the legs in midfield, which it was pretty clear to me in that first half that Hereford didn't quite have that. They weren't compact enough, they didn't have the legs to get around midfield. But obviously the changes have made a big difference. But I think, perhaps on balance, I think Steve Watson would be really disappointed that they didn't capitalise when they were all over Hereford in the first half, or certainly towards the latter stage of the first half. But, 1-1. On reflection now, I think both managers would perhaps take that.
I mean, the turnaround and momentum shift, you can almost see it, really. Darlington were trying to use Aidan Rutledge as an extra he's not really a battering ram, but you get the idea that he was going to give them another centre-forward option to give support to Jack Maskell. And as you say, it probably counteracted, giving Hereford a little bit more space in that midfield area, in which they had lacked in the first period.
That's it. I think Steve Watson, he threw the dice, and I'm not so sure it came off for him because, whilst I admire the fact that he wanted to go in for the kill and, make sure they went 2-3-0 up, it didn't quite materialise, and if anything, it really helped Hereford to get back into the game. So might have been better served leaving it as it was, dare I say it. I think they were looking, it was an upward trajectory in terms of how they were progressing into the game. So to change it at that point was a strange one for me. And
Hereford were able to use the flanks really to really good effect, weren't they? And you talked about it with Parker turning up on the left, as was one of the substitute the Villa loanee, Alani Edwards, was seemingly getting through as well.
Yeah, and I mentioned, I think I picked up on the fact that there didn't seem to be many partnerships for Hereford in the first half, but you saw a few emerging, certainly later on in the second half. As you said, with Parker kind of rampaging down the left at one point, which led to the equalising goal. And it just felt like we needed an extra body in midfield, and Parker gave us that. And it's just unfortunate that perhaps we didn't see that a little earlier. The change at half time, maybe pushing him into midfield may have yielded, potentially, you never know, a win for Hereford.
And what a strike from Sam Osborne with the outside of his right foot nesting in the corner. What a shot that was.
Yeah, it was that lovely little pirouette that he did on the edge of the box, and then with the outside of his right foot, just caught it sweetly enough for it to nestle in the back of the Darlington goal. And it was that little bit of magic that Hereford needed, because unfortunately I don't think that the two forwards, Gibson and Campbell, they weren't in the game. And I think the substitution, again, Caddis might look at that and think, could I have made those changes a little sooner, because it gave fresh impetus to Hereford, and that equaliser, you'd probably say, was deserved.
And Osborne could have done it again a minute later.
Yeah, I mean, I keep saying it. He was up and down and box to box, and if you're going to play the way that Hereford did, I think in the first half, it was Ento that was out on the wide right and wasn't necessarily tracking back. I think that was the instruction for him, if I'm perfectly honest. But if you're going to do that, you really need to make sure you're fortified in midfield. You've got that base, and Hereford just didn't have that. And as a result, consequently, they didn't pick up the second balls, and it made it really difficult for the front two. And it got too stretched too soon, really.
Great to get the thoughts there of Paul Fewings, and of course no Bulls fan will forget his goal against Leicester City in the FA Cup back in 1999 in a hurry. So perhaps a tinge of disappointment at drawing at home to newly promoted Bedford on Tuesday night, Ian, but overall, will Paul Caddis look back at this week in a positive light?
Yeah, I think he will, because it's 3 games unbeaten now, a win and 2 draws, and he'll be looking to build on that over the coming weeks. Obviously, we've got the distraction of the FA Cup, if that's what you want to call it, on Saturday, but it's a game, albeit away from home, that we'll look to win, possibly with a few changes to the starting lineup. And then the following week, Worksop, who've had an okay start to the season, but I think, if we can sort of continue to improve, then it's a game that, we'll hopefully take 3 points from at home to a newly promoted team. So, yeah, I think Caddis is looking at it as things that's pretty positive at the moment. So I think we're starting to build, starting to sort of put a few points together, accumulate some points. I think we'll gather pace in the next month or so.
What do you think, Keith? What do you think Paul Caddis will think about the last 10 days or so, the win against Alfreton and then the last 2 draws?
Well, a lot of it's about communication between the players. He was making reference to that after the Bedford game. It's the little things, mentality is a big factor in the game. And if you're not right on it right from the kickoff, maybe that's why Hereford have conceded some goals. As little tiny things that he would say, somebody, a little shout here, a little call there to get positionally, well marshalled at the back, which we necessarily haven't been. But if you can get that right, overcome those early setbacks, and then as Ian says, it's getting the ball then up the top. People were concerned about we haven't got enough strikers. Well, hopefully the arrival of Montel Gibson will set that straight.
There were plenty of late goals in the National League North on Saturday. Kings Lynn thought they'd snatched all 3 points against Alfreton when Rhys Hall-Johnson struck on 86 minutes, but Billy Fuster rescued a point in stoppage time for the Reds just 3 days after they parted company with manager Billy Heath. It finished Bedford Town 2, Oxford City 2, Merthyr 2, Worksop 0, Peterborough Sports 0, Fylde 5, Southport versus South Shields finished 0-0. Dylan Motley Henry's 95th minute equaliser earned Chester a 1-1 draw at home to Scarborough. Chorley 3, Telford 1, Radcliffe 4, Marine 1, Spennymoor 2, Leamington 0, with Glenn Taylor grabbing both goals, and Macclesfield scored a 101st minute equaliser to snatch a 1-1 draw at Kidderminster. What does that all mean for the league table? Well, South Shields are still top on 20, but have had their league cut by Fylde to just 1 point. Scarborough, who of course are playing 19 miles away in Bridlington this season due to pitch issues, are in third on 17 points. Chorley are one further behind the Sea Dogs in fourth, while Merthyr, Kidderminster and Spennymoor occupy the remainder of the playoff places. At the other end of the table, Peterborough Sports remain bottom with 4 points. Bedford are in 21st on 6, while Hereford find themselves in 19th with 8 points from 8 games. FA Cup second qualifying round action this Saturday. Hereford's assignment is a trip to Sporting Cowser, who play 2 tiers below Hereford in the Northern Premier League Division 1 West. Are these ties, Ian, all about mentality?
Yeah, I'm sure Caddis will demand that we're professional about it, whatever team he puts out on Saturday. He'll demand a sort of fully professional performance and come away without the having to worry about replays or penalties or anything like that, but a win within 90 minutes and move on, get another tie, a few more pounds in the bank, which hopefully will go in Caddis's pocket for squad building. But yes, he'll be demanding that on Saturday without any question, whoever he puts on the pitch at the start of the game.
Keith?
Yeah, Sporting Castle will be an interesting game. I think quite a few spectators remember the excellent curry before the match, and that might actually encourage a few more supporters to make the trip, because it's not far up to Willenhall. Sporting Castle got a couple of ex-Hereford players. Justice Campbell, who always seemed to be on the fringe of Josh Gowling's squad, hardly ever played, but was in the squad virtually week in, week out. And Shay Tilt, who you might remember as quite a nippy winger. He has joined Sporting Castle and was their man of the match when they beat Boston Town 2-0 in a replay to face Hereford this weekend. So he's a man in form that Hereford will have to watch at the back. Not got a great reputation in the Cup. Their best performance was to reach the fourth qualifying round in 2015-16 when they played FC United of Manchester. Record attendance 2,252 for that one, so I don't think we'll be quite getting that many enjoying the curry, but it will be a decent crowd, I'm sure.
$160 teams from Step 2 downwards take part in the FA Cup second qualifying round. Let's take a look at some of the more standout fixtures from this weekend's lineup. There are all National League North clashes as Telford host Kidderminster and Radcliffe face Southport. Leamington are making the short trip to Southern League Premier side Alvechurch. Darlington are in Liverpool to take on Bootle. Gloucester City face Chippenham, while Peterborough Sports play host to Hornchurch. There's a South-West derby as Taunton Town welcome Weston-super-Mare to Wordsworth Drive, while National League North leaders South Shields have been drawn against former 6th tier side Guiseley. Of course, all of the winning sides will progress into the third qualifying round, which takes place on Saturday, the 27th of September. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Bullscast. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify so you never miss an episode. We'll be back next week to discuss all of the latest action from Hereford FC. Until then, it's bye for now.
This is Radio Hereford FC, the home of the Bulls.